Hi friends, welcome to this IELTS speaking video. Today we're going to learn different strategies for IELTS speaking task 2. In case you don't know, IELTS speaking task 2 looks like this. You're given a prompt which you have to read. The prompt is based on a theme. So in this example, it's about a book you've read recently. And then below the main theme, there are different points you can talk about when you give your answer. You don't need to talk about each one, but they are there to guide you. And I think they are quite helpful. So that's what task 2 looks like. You get a prompt which you read and then you have to respond through speaking. You should speak for 2 minutes. And after your 2 minutes is up, the examiner will stop you. But how are you graded? What is the scoring criteria for this? Well, we'll take a look at that now, and then I'll give you some strategies for each point on the criteria to help you score high on this speaking question. If you're taking the IELTS test soon, I recommend you watch this video because these strategies will help you score higher for this speaking question. So let's take a look at that criteria now. So this is the IELTS scoring criteria. There is a lot of information here, but what we need to focus on is the top row. Basically these 4 points: fluency and coherence, lexical resource, grammatical range and accuracy, and pronunciation. These are the 4 categories which you're scored on when you do your IELTS speaking. So it's really important you know what each one means and then what strategies you can use to score high for each category. And that's what we'll do in this video from now on. And we'll start with grammatical range and accuracy first. So let's jump into that right away. To get a high score for grammar, you need to use a range of grammatical structures, some simple and some complex, as accurately as possible. If you just use simple structures, you won't score high for this point. Let's say a student said this: "The story was interesting. The story was unique. I enjoyed reading this book." Here, even though every sentence is correct, the student only used simple structures, so she wouldn't get a good score here. Instead, you need to try to use a range of grammatical structures to express your ideas. For example, to make these 3 sentences more complex, you could say this: "Since the story was interesting and unique, I enjoyed reading it." In this example, this complex sentence would get you a much higher score than if you just used simple structures. Here are some more examples of complex structures. We have adverb clauses. For example, "Although I was busy, I always found time to read this book." Another way to make your grammar more complex is to use relative clauses. These are quite easy to use. Take a look at this example. "The book was about zombies, which is something I'm fascinated about." So when you're doing your speaking answer, it is important to use a range of simple and complex sentences. That's how you get the highest score possible. In the past, I have made videos on different complex sentences. I'll put a link somewhere down here in the video description for you, but you need to learn them and you need to practice using them as accurately as you can. You can, of course, use simple structures as well, but you need to mix them up. Some simple and some difficult. Okay, now let's take a look at the next point, which is all to do with vocabulary. Even though the scoring criteria uses the word lexical, lexical means vocabulary. So what they want to see is that you use a range of different vocabulary items and that you use them accurately and correctly in your sentences. A good way to use different vocabulary is to learn synonyms for simple words. For example, interesting could become engaging or fascinating. Big could be enormous or massive. Sad, depressed or miserable. Good, brilliant or impressive. You can also learn some idioms like these examples here, or phrasal verbs like these examples here. Using a lot of different types of words will help you score high for this test. So think of things like synonyms, phrasal verbs, idioms, all of which I just showed you here. Remember, this is an English test, so your ability to express yourself using different words is what the examiners are looking for. Okay, moving on to the next point, which is fluency and coherence. When we look at the IELTS scoring criteria, we can easily understand what fluency and coherence means. To get a high score, you need to speak fluently without much repetition or many self-corrections. And importantly, you need to develop your answer fully. That last point is really important. You need to be able to develop your answer to get a good score for this category. Basically, to develop your answer, it means that you go into detail and you express your ideas really thoroughly. You can do this by giving examples or reasons to extend your ideas. Remember, this is an English test, and what we are looking for is how well you discuss or express your ideas. So during the exam, always talk more than you normally would, and that will help you to develop your ideas and score higher for fluency and cohesion. Next up, we have pronunciation. Pronunciation. Of course, these are speaking questions, so pronunciation is a really important part of speaking. But what are some things you can think about in order to get a high score for pronunciation? The main point is that your answer is easy to understand. So speak clearly and at a good pace. Not too slow, but definitely not too fast. So you need to be able to pronounce most words correctly. In order to pronounce a word correctly, you need to use the correct phonemes. A phoneme is the individual sound in a word. So b, p, k, d, etc. And make sure that the stress in the word is correct. Word stress in English is really important. For example, in the word important, the stress is on the second syllable, por, important. Next, you want to think about sentence stress and intonation. Mostly in English, when we think about sentence stress, we put the stress on the content words, mostly verbs and nouns. We don't often stress function words, grammar words, like articles or prepositions. And lastly, if you're confident, you can try to use connected speech. Connected speech is when words join together, and this helps you speak more naturally and smoothly. There are lots of different examples of connected speech, which I will cover in a later video, but an easy one you can focus on to quickly improve is to use contractions. I'm sure you know what contractions are, but try to use them when you're speaking. So here are some examples of contractions. I have, I've, she would, she'd, they are, they're, it will, it'll. Using simple contractions like these will help your pronunciation sound a lot more native-like and help you get a higher score for pronunciation on this test. So now you know how to score high based on the scoring criteria for the speaking questions. Now let's take a look at some tips to help you to answer easily and fluently. These tips will be greatly helpful, and at the end I'll show you a full practice answer which you can analyze. Okay, let's take a look at some tips. My first tip is to respond to the prompts. These prompts are here to guide you and to give you ideas of what to talk about. So I always recommend you go through each prompt point by point. That way you'll almost certainly speak for the required amount of time. Always expand your answers. So provide reasons or examples. Remember that this is an English test, so you're supposed to show off your English, and the best way to show off your English is by talking a lot about your ideas. So always expand on your answers. Give reasons, give examples, anything to talk more about your ideas. And use transition words and phrases. This will help your answer sound a lot more smooth. Here are some different examples of transition words. We have firstly, what's more, furthermore, or moreover. Finally, one more thing I'd like to talk about. You can also use transition words to move between questions. For example, turning to the next question, moving on to question 3. As for question 3. Okay, so those were some tips. Now let's take a look at a sample question with a sample answer for you to analyze. I also want you to write out your answer below in the comments. I know this is a speaking question, but still writing out your answer will be good practice for you. And this is the question we'll answer.
I recently saw a live performance of Swan Lake at an arts centre in London, where I currently live. Swan Lake is a famous ballet where many talented dancers and performers dress in amazing costumes and perform live on stage with a full orchestra. Even though I don't particularly enjoy ballet, I thoroughly enjoyed this show. Moving on to the last question, my favorite things about it were the beautiful dancing and how the dedicated cast brought the characters to life on stage. The training, practice, and preparation that must have gone into the show impressed me a lot. Another thing I enjoyed was the music as it became increasingly dramatic as the show went on, which kept me focused throughout the entire show. I had such a good time watching this ballet that it has even inspired me to buy more tickets to live shows and experience more art in my spare time.
Okay, I hope this video was helpful. Now I recommend you watch this video here because it will help you with your listening skills. Also very important for this test. Okay, thanks for watching and I'll see you here.